If you're truly committed to healing, real healing, the kind that doesn't just decorate the surface, but rebuilds you from the inside out, there's something essential you must understand. Healing is not just about becoming more positive. It's not about pretending everything's fine. It's not even about letting go in the shallow, performative way the world tells you. It's about going to the places you've buried, the ones you've kept locked in silence. It's about forgiveness, not as a favor to others, but as a sacred offering to your own soul. And there are 4 people you must forgive if you're truly ready to move forward. 4 figures in your inner world. 4 energies still living rent-free in your heart. 4 mirrors you must wipe clean, not for their sake, but for yours. Door 1. Forgive your parents, the first architects of your pain. Whether they are still walking this earth or already returned to dust. Whether they whispered lullabies or raised their voice in storms. Whether they were present or absent, warm or cold, nurturing or negligent. Your parents were the first gods you ever knew. To a child, a parent is the sun and the moon. Their words become law. Their touch becomes home or harm, and their love, or the lack of it, echoes for decades. Maybe they tried their best, but it wasn't enough. Maybe they never tried at all. Maybe they didn't know how to love because no one taught them. Or maybe they loved you, but in the only way they knew, through control, criticism, or silence. Some of us were raised by wounded children wearing adult skin. Some of us were neglected, invalidated, or shaped by rage. Some of us had everything on paper: food, shelter, school, and yet never felt safe or seen. Here's what they don't tell you. Grieving your childhood doesn't make you ungrateful, and forgiving your parents doesn't mean they were right. It means you are ready to stop bleeding from their wounds. It means you are finally choosing to stop blaming your brokenness on what they failed to give. You see, you can't rewrite your origin. You were born through them, but you don't have to carry their pain forward. It's not your job to finish the emotional work they left undone, but it is your responsibility not to pass it on. So begin here. Forgive them, not because they apologized, not because they changed, not because they deserve it, but because your soul is exhausted from replaying the same childhood scripts, because the child in you deserves freedom, because the adult in you is ready to live, grieving what wasn't given. Sit with this truth. You didn't get everything you needed, and that hurts. It's okay to admit it. It's okay to cry for the little version of you that longed for a gentle touch, for a word of encouragement, for someone to ask, what's really going on inside? Forgiveness doesn't begin with denial. It begins with grieving. Cry if you must. Write it out. Yell into your pillow. Let the grief run through you like rain over stone. And then, when the storm passes, speak this softly to yourself. They gave me life. That is all they could give. I accept what was, I release what wasn't, and I choose to build something new from this foundation. You cannot change them. You cannot make them see. You cannot travel back in time and rewrite your earliest days, but you can become the parent your inner child never had. You can hold yourself gently now. You can reparent the broken places with love, patience, and presence. You don't owe them a relationship. You don't owe them a seat at your table if they still hurt you, but you owe yourself peace. And peace begins with unburdening the past. There was someone, maybe more than one, someone who once made your heart beat louder than your fears. Someone who made you believe in forever, even if it only lasted a season. And then they left, or you left, or something fell apart in the quiet space between what was said and what was never spoken. Love, when it ends, doesn't always slam the door. Sometimes it fades slowly, like twilight giving into night. Other times, it ends in fire, fast, brutal, and consuming. And even when it's over, it doesn't feel over inside you. The body forgets quickly, but the soul remembers everything. Forgiveness here is complicated, because there was beauty, there was laughter, there were nights when your name felt safe in their mouth. There were mornings when their eyes were the reason you got out of bed, and yet there was also betrayal, or disappointment, or slow neglect, or a silence that became unbearable. You gave them a piece of your soul. You let them see your soft underbelly. You told them your fears, your dreams, your history. And they walked away, or they changed, or they stayed, but love no longer lived in their presence. You keep replaying what happened, the last conversation, the last glance, the way they said goodbye, or didn't. But you must understand something. Love is not always meant to last. Some people come to teach you, not to stay. Some souls arrive just long enough to unlock something in you, and then their time is done. Forgiveness does not mean welcoming them back. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting the pain. It means this: you no longer allow the absence of love to define your worth. Stop reopening the door. Life has closed. There is a temptation when we are lonely or nostalgic or aching to reopen the door, to check their social media, to replay the memories like old home videos, to imagine what could have been if only things had gone differently. But that door closed for a reason. Maybe it was slammed shut by betrayal. Maybe it drifted shut quietly because your souls no longer aligned. Or maybe life, in its mysterious wisdom, knew that holding on would cost you your growth. Stop knocking on closed doors. Stop trying to find healing in a place that hurt you. That version of love was not your final destination. It was a chapter, not your entire story. You cannot build a future while gripping tightly to ghosts. Forgive them, not so you can love them again, but so you can love yourself now. Wish them peace, wish them healing, wish them freedom from their own wounds, and then walk away, knowing that closure does not come from them, it comes from you. When love was real, but still not enough, this is the most painful kind. When it wasn't a lie, when the love was real, when the memories weren't illusions, but sacred truths from a shared past. You still smile when you think of certain moments. You still cry when their name catches you off guard. You still wonder why love wasn't enough. Let me tell you, sometimes love is real and still not sustainable. Sometimes people can love you and still not choose you. Sometimes two souls just aren't meant to travel the same road forever, and that is no one's fault. It is simply the nature of life. We are all growing, unfolding, changing. What fits in one season may no longer fit in the next. Forgive them not because the love wasn't real, but because holding on to a past version of love keeps you from receiving the one that awaits you. Forgive them for not being able to stay. Forgive them for the words they couldn't say. Forgive them for the way their absence still echoes through your ribcage. You loved them. They loved you in their own imperfect way. Now let that love become a blessing, not a burden. You are still lovable. You are still whole. Even without them, let go of the fantasy. One of the hardest parts of forgiveness is releasing the fantasy of what could have been, the version of them you imagined, the life you planned in your mind. Sometimes we don't grieve the person, we grieve the dream, but healing requires honesty. And honesty says that future is no longer available. And that's okay, because something else is coming, something more aligned, something rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and reciprocity. Forgive them not to rewrite history, but to give yourself permission to walk toward the future with empty hands, ready to receive what is real. In the end, every soul you've loved has taught you something. About joy, about pain, about what you want, what you can't accept, and what you will never settle for again. That was their gift. Now give yourself one in return. Let them go. Forgive the story and turn the page. This door is wide, wider than you might expect, because it doesn't open into one room, it opens into hundreds. It holds all the people whose names you still flinch at, the ones who never stayed long enough to matter deeply and yet managed to leave you with something heavy. Friends who betrayed you, teachers who mocked you, strangers who touched a wound they didn't know existed, colleagues who dismissed your effort, acquaintances who made jokes that cut like knives, family members who saw your pain and looked away. Some of them meant to hurt you, some didn't. But it doesn't matter, because hurt still hurts, whether it came from a knife or an accident. The weight of 1,000 paper cuts. We often focus on the big traumas, the obvious betrayals, the heartbreaks, the dramatic exits. But what about the small ones? The friend who slowly drifted away and never said why. The person who used your vulnerability for entertainment. The time you were excluded from the invitation, the plan, the group, the smile you offered that was never returned. You carry these things quietly. You minimize them. It's not a big deal. But your nervous system, remember. Your heart, remember. Healing requires us to admit, it was a big deal to me. It hurt me. It shaped me. Even if only in the way I flinch when someone raises their voice or joke at my expense. Forgiveness doesn't mean it didn't happen. It means you're choosing not to build a life around it. It means you're choosing not to armor your heart with bitterness. You will not get the apology. This is the hardest truth. Most of the people who hurt you will never apologize. Not because they're evil, but because they don't know or don't care. Or they've rewritten the story in their head to make themselves feel better. Or they've convinced themselves it wasn't that bad. And maybe it wasn't to them, but it was to you. You do not need their apology to move forward. You do not need their permission to heal. You do not need them to understand, validate, or acknowledge. What you need is peace, and peace begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to hand it to you. What forgiveness is and isn't. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is not trusting again. Forgiveness is not saying it didn't matter. Forgiveness is not inviting them back into your life. Forgiveness is reclaiming your energy. It's standing at the grave of what happened and saying, I no longer need this pain to make sense. I just need it to stop owning me. You don't forgive them for them. You forgive them for you. So your joy isn't tainted by memory. So your laughter isn't filtered through trauma. So you don't spend the rest of your life turning pain into armor. There is no power in holding a grudge, but there is immense power in laying it down and walking away with your head high. This is the one we avoid, the one we bury beneath every other name on our forgiveness list, because it's easier to blame others, easier to point outward than inward, easier to stay angry at what they did than to face what we did or failed to do. But eventually, you will look in the mirror, and when you do, you will realize the final person who must be set free is you, the one you abandoned. You've made mistakes. You've hurt people. You've said the wrong things. You've stayed silent when you should have spoken. You've been careless with hearts, especially your own. You've sabotaged good things. You've ignored your intuition. You've settled. You've clung to people who didn't deserve your time. You've betrayed your own body by ignoring its cries for rest, for food, for gentleness. And maybe you feel ashamed of how long it took you to leave, ashamed of how low you let your standards fall, ashamed of the version of you who didn't know better. But hear me clearly now. You did the best you could with what you had, with the tools you were given, with the love you had been taught, with the pain you hadn't yet processed. You were surviving. You were reaching for love, even if it came wrapped in thorns. You were trying to matter, even if it meant shrinking. You were doing what wounded people do, searching for home in all the wrong places. And that does not make you broken, that makes you human. The guilt you carry. Some of the hardest guilt is the kind that doesn't have a resolution. It's not about right or wrong. It's about the quiet ache of knowing you lost time. Time you spent pretending. Time you spent angry. Time you spent being someone you weren't. Time you spent chasing things that only left you emptier. But guilt is not a guide, it is a ghost. You cannot build a future while holding hands with the past version of yourself that you no longer are. Forgive them. The you who didn't know how to ask for help. The you who tolerated disrespect. The you who stayed too long. The you who ran too fast. The you who was scared, lonely, angry, numb. They were trying, and their story deserves compassion, not condemnation. Let go of the ideal. We all hold an image of who we should have been, the better version, the wiser version, the one who said the right thing, chose the better path, saved the day. But here's the truth. That version didn't exist, not because you were weak, but because you hadn't yet lived what you've lived now. Wisdom is born from experience, from falling down, from hurting, from regret. You're wiser now because of who you once were, and the only way to honor that growth is to forgive your origin story. Let the shame go. It served its purpose. It taught you. It shaped your conscience. Now it's time to set it down and walk unburdened. The inner voice. If someone spoke to your child the way you speak to yourself, if someone judged your best friend the way you judge yourself, would you stay silent? Probably not. So why do you let your inner voice berate you? Why do you tolerate the cruel monologue that runs through your head? You cannot shame yourself into healing. You cannot punish yourself into peace. Only love can do that. Only gentleness. Only understanding. Speak to yourself as if you were sacred, because you are. And you've been waiting a long time to hear your own kindness. Say it aloud if you must. I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because the cost of withholding it is your joy. You are not the past. You are not what happened. You are not your trauma. You are not the choices you made when you didn't know better. You are not the relationship you ruined. You are not the version of yourself who couldn't cope. You are not the memory that still makes you wince. You are this moment, this breath, this choice, this new day. Forgiveness means welcoming yourself home. Forgiveness means saying, I will no longer abandon myself to punish who I used to be. You are allowed to rise. You're allowed to start again. You're allowed to look in the mirror and see someone worthy of love. Now, not once you've fixed everything, not once you've achieved more. Now returning to wholeness. When you forgive yourself, something remarkable happens. The shame loses its voice. The self-sabotage begins to quiet. You begin to make choices from love, not fear. From clarity, not guilt. Forgiveness is a return, not to perfection, but to wholeness. You were never meant to be flawless. You are meant to be real, to be growing, to be learning, to be becoming. You have paid enough. It's time to come home to yourself, not as a punishment, but as a gift. Visual. The person steps out of shadow into sunrise, breathes deeply, hand to heart. Say it again, I forgive you. Let that be the beginning of everything.